Welcome back, Red Spotters, and those are here in the Red Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Alexis J. Soto, joined today by my fellow agent, Mr. David Francisco, in our weekly Beyond the Shield recap series for the final episodes, the final season of Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And today, we're at the very end of that. We are going to talk about the episodes number 12, The End is at Hand, and number 13, What We're Fighting For. It was telecast and billed as a 2-hour series finale. And what a finale it was. Mm-hmm. There is so much to say, really, about all of the little details, all of the answers that we've been asking all season, as well as all of the emotional payoffs that we got for 7 seasons of television viewing. Too much, in fact, I think. So just keep in mind and bear with us. This is going to be a longer episode, I imagine, because we're covering 2 episodes, not just 1. Really, it is one big, long episode, but it's, 12 and 13. As we've been saying, of course, the premieres and the finales of this show normally act as like 2-part finales and 2-part premieres, just how the history has been like for this series. But if there's an appropriate place to start for this review, I guess it would have to be in the fact that during the last week, we witnessed this finale, and at least for me personally, I've been going through a lot of wonderful exit interviews that the cast and crew have gone through media outlets like IGN, Fandom, the AV Club, as well as wonderful videos that the Marvel YouTube channel has released, like Ian DeCasticker and Elizabeth Henstridge saying goodbye to Fitzsimmons. And perhaps most emotionally resonant was a released video of a recording of the final table read for the last episode 13. And as emotional as all of that has been, I find myself having a really difficult time in buying any of it. The fact that this is now officially over. David and I were actually having a text back and forth the night of the premiere, and we were actually both watching it as it was airing, which is, I know for David's case, not typically how he watches it, but I'm sure he'll tell that story as to why he felt necessary to do so. But we were talking about that, and as it ended, it still just didn't feel real. And when it comes to experiences that I expect to just completely destroy me and don't, it usually happens because I'm in denial. And I guess I kind of am. And so we'll be talking a lot about endings. Good news for this, a lot of happy endings. In fact, mostly happy endings. And I'm very satisfied. Really, I am, with just about everything. But I can't anticipate when possibly I am going to just emotionally explode because of this. I've talked for such a long time, not just in the course of, doing this Beyond the Shield series, but to all of my friends who, even to, of course, their chagrin for like having even discussed the show for such a long time and for however many times we have. But this particular cast, these characters, television is such an intimate medium by design. Throughout my entire life, I've always felt a particular connection with television shows over movies because you just commit much more time with them, especially in the years as they progress. As they grow, you grow as well. And I can definitely say how profound of a change I've had in myself as an individual from the beginning of this entire series in September 2013 to where I was out of high school. I was my first semester of college, community college. And, fast forward 6-ish years later, and I have gone through so many experiences, some amazing, some tumultuous, but in every step of the way, I always had a connection to this show as a source of complete comfort and joy, even in the bleakest of times. Especially in an age right now, unfortunately, that 170,000 of our fellow Americans have died because of a deadly pathogen that is out there every single day, getting people infected and killing people. So this particular show, these people, these characters have been there for me through thick and thin. And that may be part of the reason why I'm just having a hard time accepting this. They've been literally the beginning of me being excited about Marvel happened because of this show. Yes, I saw the Avengers and Iron Man 3 before this, and as we all know, those were my first MCU movies. But this show really got me hooked. And one of the more difficult aspects of this to accept is the fact that it's been 7 years. I don't know where the time went. I am in this very room, as a matter of fact, my room here in my home, where I first watched this show. And in the duration of that, I had gone through many different homes. I think 5 I even mentioned, 5 locations, different apartments. And I swung all the way back around here for the final season, for the final episodes, for the final moments of this. And I gotta be honest with you, this show, even from the beginning moments of it, were kind of catching me in places where my professional life and my personal life were at very low lows for many, many times. Mm-hmm. And I cannot express to you enough, and of course, I can't express enough thanks, enough appreciation to the people of this show, to the writers, to everyone, for just being there for me in a time where I really needed an escape. I really, really did. And so much of what we do now, what I do, is rooted from that. So much of who I am and so much of how these characters have grown have really mirrored events in my life. It's so personal to me. I know these characters so well. They're fictional characters, but they feel just like family. They really do. And that is a long preamble to say that as we begin talking about these last episodes, and as we usually do with, these episodes, we will go very broad in terms of how we felt about them, what we liked ultimately, what were some aspects that were less desirable. And considering this is 2 episodes that we're covering, we'll do it as cleanly as possible, as after we sum up our feelings about it overall and how it left us, what feeling it left us with. We will go into the individual episodes, recap the events that happened, and go character by character with the end at hand, and then, of course, what we're fighting for. But all of which is to say is, I really couldn't have asked for anything more than I received in this finale. The words that come to mind, and you may have heard this described in other shows with other properties, but it keeps resonating with me. Just pitch perfect in terms of how it wrapped everything up. These writers always get us. They always fucking get us with these webs that they weave, and they always make us doubt a little bit how they can cleanly wrap everything together, because we haven't the slightest idea, and they'd always, for 7 years, have kept us guessing where it was all going to go. And now that it's all said and done, it to me is one of the most satisfying finales to anything I have ever witnessed. It made my heart so full of joy. It left an amazing smile on my face. And at the end of the day, everything that we had in here, kind of to mirror the title of the episode, what we're fighting for, this is what we're watching for, ultimately. So, I've seen this finale, I think, twice. I've seen many YouTubers' reactions to this and how it landed with them. And David, really, at the end of the day, isn't a happy ending the best ending?
Yeah.
Go ahead, David. Tell us. I do want to be clear. Like, I always feel guilty for like hogging up a lot of the time, but I just want to make sure like my feelings are out there about this episode. But...
No, it's fine. Yeah, you're definitely like way more passionate about this show than I am. Like, I love the show. Mm-hmm. I'm literally rewatching it right now from the beginning. So, but you know, I did get a satisfying ending to it and everything, and I don't feel the same way as you do. I mean, at least as passionate as you do. But it was still a very satisfying ending of the show, especially because, you know, it wasn't just, you know, the ending wasn't just like a great, oh my God, what's the word?
Season?
Like, no. I mean, it was a great season, yeah.
Send off?
The end. No.
I'm just trying to guess what words you want to use.
It was it was a great payoff, I guess, for what was set up in the beginning. Yeah, but not just from like this season, but from past seasons. Yeah, and everything. And like I'll talk about certain moments of it that was very satisfying. But you know, I mean, you almost said everything.
See, I try to not every week. But I can't help myself. This is like my favorite TV show ever, and rarely, you know. I guess I should like thank you for letting me go a little long, because like Kyle and Peter would never let me like talk this much. Never let me talk this much. They really know when to cut me off, I guess, but. Just to get all of our feelings out there at once. No, this was, I think, overwhelmingly just an amazing place to leave all of these characters. I think it was really well done. Mm-hmm. You can really tell just how, you know, it ended. It was really well thought out of. What were the best places to leave these characters? And what were the last things that they would say that we would hear with, you know, the community that is, of course, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. So, yeah. Overall, it still acts as a great finale for this season, with all the character stuff going on and all the story stuff. But you're so right when you say that it also felt very appropriate in terms of like the overall arc for 7 seasons of television for a lot of these characters. It very much, there were also a lot of Easter eggs here that reached back to the earliest iterations of this show. And you know what, let's just start off there. And these are getting ready for some spoilers, people. You know, you have your warning there. But in terms of all the callbacks that we got, Victoria Hand made a cameo appearance in this. She was one of the first Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. from the first season, she was killed off by Grant Ward, and so she had to get back at Garrett there. We'll talk more about that later. The final combination that Mac gives to Coulson, 136, to open up the briefcase that would reveal Lola's keys, 136 episodes. 136.
Mm-hmm.
Daisy calls Coulson AC.
AC. Oh my god.
And that's kind of one of the things they try to go with. Oh my god, way back in the early half of season 1. Even one of the weapons that Mac and Sousa used against the Chronocoms, that staff, that was directly from season 1. The mention of an 084. When was the last time anything like that? We heard the name 084 being mentioned.
No, so watching the finale, that staff thing, I did not remember it. The 084, did not remember it. I remembered Victoria Hand, and I didn't catch the AC part. I didn't hear it at all. But, after watching the finale on television, the next day, after I watched it, I went, okay, tomorrow I'll rewatch it just to kind of see through it. But I wake up and I'm like, I can't watch it.
You can't?
Even today, I was kind of I don't want to rewatch it. Oh god,
it hurts.
Yeah, it kind of hurts. So instead, I started rewatching the first season. And then that's when I noticed the staff, AC. And then I'm like, oh my god, they added everything, didn't they? Huh?
They really did. I know we just had last week a wonderful bit where they were making fun of Quake's name, but in the beginning of the end at hand, Max calls Daisy Tremors, and that was the name that was used before Quake happened, and that's what Mac would call Daisy. Here's one that is really kind of deep cut in terms of how long they've been playing with this, and maybe this may resonate with you now more since you've gone back and started watching the first season. But ever since we met Fitz, he'd always go off about having a pet monkey. He'd always have an obsession with monkeys of some sort. And it would be an ongoing thing where they would, very subtly address it in some areas. Last season, in the episode Fear and Loathing on Planet Kitson, while Gemma was tripping on some shrooms, she had a little vision of literal Fitz in a monkey costume on her straw. So he's always had an obsession with that. And what I find really appropriate is that he finally got his monkey in the form of his little girl, where he, not only does she have a toy monkey in the bunk that she was placed in, he literally calls her his little monkey.
Oh my god.
So I'm just impressed, really, at the number of things they're able to pay off, reaching all the way back from the beginning of the series. The whole cavalry moment, which really embodies the journey that is May, from starting out hating that name and hating being identified with that, with her coming full circle and full on embracing that, and
she
having grown.
She literally says in the first season, don't call me that.
Yep.
It's I told you never to call me that. And I got chills the first and second time watching it. Oh,
I know. There was even a line from Mac where he says to May while they're trying to board the Chronocom vessel, that was some serious flying out there. And May was like, it used to be all I did. Literally, that was all she would do.
Yeah.
So, and I'm sure we'll catch more as we go through this review, but those are the ones that stuck out in my mind the clearest at this particular moment. So we should start with The End Is at Hand, episode 12. And it is, they're again, just to be clear, they're less individual episodes and more two parts of the same episode. which is very much what this felt like in this particular case. So off the bat, I think where we can start off with this episode, this is all Daisy, Mac, and Sousa boarding the Chronicom mothership. They break out Simmons, who has been given this shot which is dissolving her memory implant, and it's fucking up with her memories. Mac and Sousa figure out a way to bomb their way out of this. Meanwhile, Coulson, May, and Yo-Yo at the lighthouse are having to deal with John Garrett trying to blow up the lighthouse, as well as coming to contact with an 084 signal. And they both of these groups converge with the speakeasy that has been a very, really, I think, successfully utilized space all throughout this season. Of course, they would go back there to kind of wrap things up with a clean bow. And we see that the surviving agents have been convened there to bring out pieces of junk, seemingly, to which Gemma Simmons puts together the only thing she can remember mysteriously. And then she reveals a quantum realm portal and brings Fitz back into the fold for the final chapter of the series. So that's a lot already right there. Yeah. But if we can start off with complimenting the visual effects, this is what they were saving their money for. And to be real, Jed Whedon was even asked about this. I think it was by AV Club, about how well in advance they plan out the budgets for the last episodes, because you can just tell, even the opening moments, how much more money a lot of these effects the fact that we even have effects in the first place can tell you how much money it was. And there was actually a stunning admission by Jed Whedon when he said, we kind of fucked up in the beginning of the season. Like, we all thought, like, well, we're not gonna need as many visual effect shots because we're going back in time. But then we forget, we're going period 30s. That's a lot of money. That hat is a lot of money. Oh my God, what did we do? So they may have been a little over ambitious from a money perspective. And it just reminds you, like, this is a Marvel flagship television series, but it is on network television. And you can see the seams of the show, especially in, as we had talked about in that other episode where they were confined basically to the lighthouse because there was no money for anything else to do, because they wanted to save a lot of that for what they had for these final 2 or 3 episodes. We got a lot of little teases of great VFX shots last week, but with this one off the bat, we're already beginning with I really love the design of the Chronicom ships, especially with that little spiral blue. Yeah, it's like orange thing.
I mean, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just sort of like an energy being surrounded. I don't know what the heck it is, but no, it looks futuristic.
Yeah, I mean, I think they were the best designed spaceship of the whole show. I think it was much preferable. I think much grander than the Confederacy spaceships that we would see in seasons 5 and 6. And we see one of those Confederacy ships when they go back to the original timeline. But yeah, the outward, this definitely feels, oh my God, we're at a grand scale. We start off with them blasting off all of the shield bases. We have them literally beam up the Zephyr into the hangar, and that hangar was massive. I was surprised. They really was like, we didn't need to have that. Like, that was one of the biggest hangars I've ever seen any spaceship have. And you can tell how immensely detailed the construction of that VFX shot was to look as good as it did. It was great, really.
Yeah. No, I mean, I like the basically everything about that beginning. It's just kind of like, it builds it up intensely, especially like when they're being pulled into the hangar and you just see like the beams, the tractor beams, like holding him in place. It kind of like, it's a great setup. It's a great setup for an intense scene, but then you just immediately cut it with something funny where they're like getting ready to fight, and then Sousa just goes, "What are the chances that they're like waiting for us outside, like the way we are?"
Yeah, I was wondering that myself. The second time I watched that, I wondered if they even like waited for the Zephyr to be in the hangar. Couldn't they have just like teleported off altogether through John Garrett? I assume that happened because the doors weren't open. At least the hangar door of the Zephyr wasn't open. It just looked abandoned. So that is interesting. And that was hilarious. They were all like looking, what are the chances someone's on the other side? Yeah, of course there wasn't anybody on the other side and everything.
Yeah.
But yeah, they even had some new hallways to show off in this episode of the spaceship. You know, you gotta like squeeze the money for what you can do for hallways, right? But overall, you know, the design was actually very, very simple yet appropriate for who these Chronicoms are. Really, I think at the end of the day. And we see... Yeah, I mean, overall, the visual effects were outstanding. Especially when we see the utilization of Cora and Daisy's powers. I love that shot where she just basically blocks it. She's using her quake powers as a force field, basically, and that's. I don't think she's ever used her powers like that before. So I'm happy. Like even at the end, we're finding new ways to see how her powers continue to evolve as the character is too. Yeah, we're still not sure what exactly Cora's powers are.
I want to say it's like electricity, but it doesn't seem that way. But I don't know.
I think it was left intentionally vague, considering what they have her do with them. There are actually a range of things that she can do. It seems like, based on how they're utilized. But yeah, so with all of the VFX stuff, we have amazing character moments, of course, galore with all of this. On the humorous side, while also recapping a season-long relationship with Gemma and with Deke. I love how even though Gemma is just completely losing it, she still completely trusts Deke. And it really is an example of how far they've come, not just this season, but throughout their history together, how close they've become. And of course, you know, you can't have Deke without any little bit of humor. And his impression of Fitz killed me.
Oh my god, I really didn't expect that at all. Like I would have expected the accent and everything, but the way he like mimic his I don't know, his stance or something, I was like, oh my god, he does do that, doesn't he?
Yep. It's kind of perfect, man. Really.
Yeah. the like the Gemma's response though when he's doing the accent, he's like, I'm an engineer, I'm a scientist.
I'm bio. You're bio. I'm tech. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like, I'm James Bond. I was like, no.
But not entirely surprising, because that's exactly how Simmons would see Fitz, as her James Bond, basically. Yeah. So Deke is always great for an amazing moment that is rooted in such great character stuff too. Oh my god. And if, you know, talking about the character moments, so we start off with, you know, fresh off the events of last week, Sousa just goes for it, kisses Daisy as she's about to go. And I think that was like the final bit of evidence to show you just how great this works and how surprising it is, because in one of the interviews that I read, Chloe Bennett was very unsure about whether this was a good direction to go with. Even, of course, Whedon and Tancharoen felt this way as well. And they all said, I think, in their own ways, I think Tancharoen said, we wouldn't have done it if it didn't work on screen. But when we saw Enver and Chloe together, we just felt the chemistry from the beginning. So it wasn't until the two actors were in a room together where they decided that this is the direction they were going to go to, which I feel is the smart decision to make, because you don't want to do those things by just like assuming this is going to happen, especially considering that this is supposed to be handled as a very last minute, but also that's kind of the point situation. But they do have chemistry, and it seems as the episodes have gone, it gets stronger and stronger. And so I'm just left with, at least from that moment, just completely sold, having no doubts whatsoever that this is something that works and works really well. How about you? Oh, and of course, that moment where Mac was like impressive, and that was pretty impressive as he walked off and everything.
Yeah. I mean, I know we were kind of hesitant in the beginning of it, and I can't remember what I said last week about how it kind of. Oh yeah, I remember that. Like I said that I just kind of didn't know how like Daisy was kind of be
attracted to him.
Relationship. Yeah, attracted to him and all that. But then I also realized after rewatching the first season, is that I'm used to like when characters have chemistry, I'm used to them going back and forward a lot. You know what I mean? So like basically the way Fitz and Gemma were in the first season, just kind of like they're working on the lab and they're just going back and forth. They're finishing each other's sentences, and so I think that's kind of what threw me off with Sousa and Daisy's relationship, is that it wasn't really so much a great back and forth with them, but I mean I think what the show did amazingly was that it was just a good build up.
Yeah.
To it. It was surprising basically that it worked, they worked, and that I'm actually invested.
A surprise to be sure, but a welcome one, as Chancellor Palpatine would say. Weird to be quoting him, but that's actually a pretty useful quote in this sense. And we have to keep in mind, of course, that it very much was for that intended purpose. It was supposed to feel like something that came out of nowhere. And I feel like that was rooted in relationships that seemingly form out of nowhere, but then just work so well. The reason what was concerning, at least slightly, when people were suggesting a romantic entanglement was, well, there's just not enough time to develop that. There's no time left to make us care about it. And we've seen a lot of television shows in particular, a lot of movies that can't make a relationship work because of how little time there is. They really try to get us somewhat moved. I keep going back to this. I don't want to bash the show ultimately, because I do enjoy most of it, but it was one of the more disappointing aspects that when all said and done, 2 seasons of television couldn't make me care about Daenerys or Jon Snow as a couple. But in 1 season, they were able to get me fully invested in this, as ultimately was the arc with Daisy, in the fact that she needs to move on, the fact that she would have a difficult time moving on, and this was her family, and possibly the only way that she would be able to move beyond that was to grow her family into areas that we wouldn't anticipate. So it was a very earned moment. And again, I think you and I are in agreement on this. If we had seen the script of this like a year ago, we would have been like, are you sure you guys want to do that?
Yeah.
But it is one of the surprises of the season. Again, like it's so nice to have some surprises. I mean, there were a lot of surprises from a plot standpoint in terms of but we were expecting to be like, at this point with the show, we come to expect that in some ways the revelations are going to be a little mind-blowing. But from a character standpoint, that was just so... I think why it worked ultimately is because Chloe Bennett and Enver are so great as actors, and they made it pop. They made it come to life in their interactions throughout the season. And in particular, it should go without say that Sousa was a highlight of this season, and an example of how they can just take any character and put them in any season. And I mean, I can't think of any other example where you just literally pluck a character out of another TV show, take him into yours, and do such amazing stuff with him. Sousa,
I can think of one.
Yeah, you can?
Yeah, actually, the Legends of Tomorrow from the CW.
Oh,
They
okay.
got Constantine, and Constantine was
I
a show
forgot
on
about
NBC.
that. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so they got him. He ended up on Arrow first, but then they put him on the Legends of Tomorrow, and yeah, he's pretty cool. He's really great.
And he was probably integrated really well.
Oh, yeah.
That's a tall order, but yeah, Sousa in and of himself, talking about surprises, was an amazing surprise all season long. Not just from the stuff with him and Daisy, but ultimately him coming to his own as a member of the team also felt very organic. He found his place pretty quickly and really beautifully and warmly welcomed into this whole thing. So yeah, I mean, we go off in. Did you want to say something? I'm sorry.
Well, it's also what kind of helped with Sousa and Daisy's relationship was that Daisy herself was surprised by it.
Yes,
because I think it was it was last week's episode where she looks at Sousa and then Mac looks at her. It's like, really, and she's kind of like, yeah, I guess, I don't know. And then at the end of the finale, she's still surprised by it. Like, I can't believe this is still working out.
I mean, because I feel like, I don't know if, I think it must have been Clark Gregg that said this in one of the exit interviews, that Sousa is the first boyfriend that Daisy's had that hasn't died.
Mm-hmm.
The running joke with her is like, she's kind of the kiss of death.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, kind of like Elizabeth Swann was in the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. She kissed so many guys and most of them died. Actually, they all did. And some came back to life.
Yeah.
But yeah, great point too. The fact that she herself was caught off guard by it, and yet how at home she felt with him. It seemed like by the end of how they wrapped everything up with them. Just great work. And, to stay on Sousa, what amazing interactions, of course, he's had with other members of the cast, in particular with Mac this week. With, at the end of Hand, they're thinking about what they can do to get the hell out of that Chronocom ship. And not only do they take down 6 Robocops, basically, but Sousa has the amazing idea to recall the events of episode 3 to when they were trying to take down Helios, to remind basically the audience that, oh yeah, they basically are bombs in and of themselves. And we can strap them, hilariously an amazing shot. We can strap up these carcasses on a damn rocket and we can bust our way out with this massive explosion. So good.
The duct tape was a bit too much, but I like how you kind of see though that they probably use like 50 rolls of duct tape.
Well, yeah. Otherwise, how would it work?
Yeah, but it was still a great shot. Though.
It's making you laugh.
Cool.
I think that was the intended, effect of it. It was so. It's the kind of humor I think the show has become known for. It's just so over the top and crazy but it works, and it ended up doing that. And so we then have the events with Daisy and Cora. And this is an interesting dynamic here because, as we talked about last week, neither of us saw Cora making it out alive. And we weren't entirely sure of how things were going to happen. We had a pretty good idea of like Cora was going to either lay her life down to sacrifice herself for Daisy in the way of Nathaniel. That didn't necessarily pan out how we first saw it. It was kind of a different way in how it was executed. As far as like that confrontation with Daisy and with Cora in the hallway, what I loved so much about that moment is it was basically, and I feel that this was done by design, a repeat of her confronting Talbot, or Graviton if you rather, at the end of season 5. And remember how that confrontation was set up by Coulson. I've taught you everything I know how to have this conversation. It's time for you to give the Coulson talk. Appeal to their better nature. And if they don't, use the strength within you to beat their ass senseless, is what he said to her. And that's basically, she failed ultimately to convince Talbot of that. She had a little bit of a breakthrough, but the Gravitonian inside him was just, it made him too crazy. Well, Korra is a different situation. She's not necessarily nuts, but she's very manipulated. And she's been fed a bunch of lies her entire existence. Well, after, Nathaniel intervened and everything. But in this case, she was using her powers for defense. And she was coming from a genuine place. And she was appealing to her better nature. And it was Daisy's chance to be successful, thus completing the arc of her entire character. And completing, from her being in Korra's position, basically at the beginning in season 1, being this lost person who could be manipulated by bat forces like the rising tide back in the first few episodes. She was a double agent for that organization. And her basically coming back around to being the Coulson. It very much is one of those scenes like we see in Star Wars, where, Han Solo goes to Kylo Ren and tries to, of course it didn't work out at all there. We know that he kind of was killed for it. But clearly Daisy wasn't in any danger, even though she did say that she wasn't, that if she died, it would be up to her, up to Korra. And that sense of sacrifice and selflessness really struck her to the point where she was just thrown off entirely, to where she was beginning to question finally. And I feel it was like a 1-2 punch to kind of wear her down. May did a lot of the heavy lifting, I feel, last week, in terms of like establishing that there would be a point of getting her around. But Daisy, I think, was the final straw in getting her to essentially, for reals this time, reevaluate what her standing is in all of this. So that was just an especially powerful moment for Daisy in that sense. Plus, of course, it was a cool shot with all the powers and everything.
The sparks and everything. No, I actually didn't see it that way, that scene. It was just kind of like, I was just more convinced, like, okay, what's she gonna say or do to convince Korra on her side? And I thought they were gonna leave with them after that, but no, she stayed behind and everything. But it was a sweet moment between them. I gotta be honest, I can't remember what was said in their conversation, but I just remember I liked seeing Daisy basically being Coulson in that moment.
Yes.
But also kind of, I guess, heartbreaking for Korra, just because she was being manipulated right from the very beginning. And now someone tells her like, hey, you have a choice here, but now Daisy kind of tells her the consequences of like whatever she chooses. So
and the fact with Korra is another aspect with her is that she's also in the way of Sybil and her plans. You could tell immediately Malik. I'm glad we didn't get like a Malik like double crossing Sybil, because that just would have been annoying, like straight up. Like I don't think we had the time for that. But Malik and Sybil have very different approaches, as we've seen through this season, and he's been getting very, very impatient, and that may be, and I think ultimately that was his downfall. Is just he's way too impatient and just wants to get to the point. And him sending Korra because he just wants Daisy gone and out of the picture really is what fucked them over in the end, because Sybil really would have found out in that moment, as Gemma was beginning to remember the memories that would have revealed or would have exposed Fitz's location. But of course that didn't happen, and they have to regroup. And Sybil took that rather well as soon as like Malik knocked Korra out of the way. And there were several moments where Malik was just deliciously evil. He's impatient and confused about why Korra was just there doing nothing. And the look on his face when Korra says to him, "I think Daisy's good," is hilarious to me, because he just wants to really kill her in that moment. And he just like, he plays it really coolly. Like, stay right there. Let me turn my back. Let me get my gun and I'm going to shoot you. Okay. And then he does. And of course, no shit. That's the kind of like piece of shit that Malik is. And he does it twice in this episode where he also completely leaves John Garrett to die. I also love that exchange where he was like, well, let me take this time and thank you for your service. And then we cut back to Garrett and he's like, son of a bitch. And like, man, that made me laugh so hard because it was like, well, what the fuck did you expect? Yeah. It reminded me a lot of that moment in the Clone Wars with Maul where he said to Gar Saxon, die well, Mandalorian. As he's about to leave. So, yeah, the kind of characters these guys are. Yeah. Yeah,
basically. No, yeah, it was obvious. Malik's insane. And you mentioned, though, like, how he's impatient. And I think that's what Sybil said was... she didn't say, like, humanity's weakness is not impatience, but that it's time.
You know nothing of time, I think she said to him.
Yeah. And so it kind of ties into what she was saying. Yeah. Basically, time, either we're impatient or we just don't really spend enough time with other people, basically. That's kind of... I think that's how I kind of see it when she mentions how we don't perceive time, basically.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of cool that, his downfall was the thing that Sybil said that we humans don't understand.
Mm-hmm. And so then we have to go with the other part of the episode, which is all going down the lighthouse. So we had more of James Paxton as John Garrett. And really, because killing it. Like every line is just feels like something that was out of like an unused script for season 1 for Bill Paxton. When he comes into the lighthouse and he's radioing Malik, this is the big bad wolf here at the hen house, ready to fry some chicken. Like that's just the kind of shit that Bill Paxton's character would have said back in the first, season of this. So it just plays into the legacy of that character. And yeah, we get, story beats with, him partially destroying the lighthouse, having to bury them out of the rubble. Coulson hears the 084. And then they go and they regroup. They, for a moment, get, James Paxton on his side. And then they arrive at, just real quick, I'm gonna wrap around back with me and Coulson in a bit. But with Garrett, just to get him out of the way with, because it was so funny to me. It was one of those things that S.H.I.E.L.D. does where they kill someone off and they do it so suddenly and so like unapologetically and so savagely that you just have to laugh. So when they go to the speakeasy and they're being fired on by S.H.I.E.L.D. agents and they fucking just shoot him in the head out of fucking nowhere and he drops dead on the floor. And I'm like, I think that may have been one of the loudest laughs of the whole thing, because like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, I remember I just went, oh shit. Like it really came out of nowhere and almost got kind of like, oh my god, what about the rest of the gang? Like, are they gonna get killed too or what? But no, they were just completely fine. And then I love it though. You see Victoria hand and she's like, oh my god, I shot one of our own. And then you just get the like May and Yo being like, no, he's a traitor, it's fine. Yeah. He's the one that caused this. Like, you're fine.
That was hilarious so to me, because like it looked as if they were setting up something of a redemption, but they're like, no, fuck off. Basically is what it, that it wasn't as funny or as horrific, but it reminded me of how in season 5, what's her name, Ruby, killed off the Strucker kid. I know that I shouldn't laugh, but it was just so gross and so over the top that it's just hilarious every time we see that clip of her just with her gravitonian powers like snap his face into like folding him like a piece of paper. Oh my god, it's so good. It's so good.
No, but then about the actor though that plays Garrett.
Mm-hmm.
Again, rewatching season 1. Finally, I haven't seen it since like it first aired. So like,
You're
this is like
kidding me.
Yeah.
You haven't seen these episodes since like that's 2013. Oh my god! Wow.
So there was a bunch of surprises. For one thing, though, you know, everyone knows this, but like you see the Shield logo at the end of the episodes, and then like you get like a little after credit scene. I didn't know about those till like season 5 or something. I don't know.
What?
Yeah. So I was very surprised that Nick Fury came out in the second episode.
Are you? Wow.
Yeah. So I was like, "Oh my god, he came out! What?" Yeah. So that was surprising. But when you finally see Garrett though in the first season, I immediately went, "Oh my god, that his son killed it!" In the show. Holy shit! Like, and I remember when we first saw him, season 7, Garrett. You mentioned the fact that some other people were going like, "Oh, he seems a bit too crazy."
Mm-hmm.
This Garrett here, and like my excuse was like, "Well, he's a younger version of himself. Like he is. I'm sure he is a bit crazy." But after rewatching the first season, I'm like, "Oh no, this is exactly how he is."
Yeah, it really is.
Oh my
god. He's one of those people that didn't really change, and that may ultimately speak to why he's kind of a bad guy. He's one of those lovable bad guys because he's just so like eccentric and crazy by default. And when he said, "I'm gonna wear a white hat" or some shit like that, and then there's a close up of him like with James Paxton doing the role in this episode with a big smile, and it was like that's Bill Paxton's smile.
Yeah,
perfect casting. I think he did an amazing job with that. And also in story, Victoria Hand finally getting to kill John Garrett, who she said that she wanted to shoot when it was revealed that he was a traitor and they had captured him and they were going to go send him away. But of course the whole Ward thing happened and she was killed instead. So yeah. She didn't need to feel bad at all for he shot the bullet in the head. Like, wow. Remember, like, in the first, like, season of this show, the only reason they created those icers, at that point they were called night-night guns, was because it was airing at 8 o'clock and the network didn't think it was appropriate to basically kill people, like, in cold blood like that. 7 years later, it's just, it is what it is.
Yeah.
So you see like how the show in and of itself has grown in terms of what they were allowed to do and then what they couldn't do in those early episodes from a broadcast television standpoint. Of course, I mean, one of the more graphic ones is when they cut off Yo-Yo's arms, or when Yo-Yo slit Ruby's throat. That was pretty fucking intense, when they impaled Fitz. That was, a lot of really gross imagery, but just like, heart stopping and everything. So with Coulson and May, I love how they're continuing on. Look, I love that the finale, we're progressing the story along, but we're also having the space to have these what would be final character interactions and final character moments. And we're taking the time, as the episode last week did, to really look back on how far the characters have grown. How the Russos always say the distance the characters have traveled. And in this case, we have this wonderful exchange where Coulson and May, while they're trying to set up the device to capture Garrett, they talk about themselves and how much they've changed from the beginning of the show, and how, Coulson at first was like, "I'm just tech," and then May, and this is a change in tone from earlier where she pretty much like told him off and like, "I'm not going to give you any kind of sympathy. You're just like a knockoff version of this," or whatever. And she's like, "Do you really believe you're just tech?" And her being a little bit more conciliatory with her tone in that sense. And then this would signal the immediate answer to the question that has been Coulson's arc of this season, which is, do you really just believe that? And Coulson's not really. It gets to me sometimes. I think it was kind of what was expressed there, but ultimately he is Coulson. It's not just a story where it's reverting back to he's just, a bunch of ones and zeros. Which, by the way, amazingly, like, besides, giving LMD Coulson a full-fledged character arc in this season, they've used him in ways I wouldn't even think of. By, with him being able to read code, him being able to basically be a techie, fill in, for Deke and for Fitz in that role, and then also be able to hear the coded transmission of the 084. They've used him in such great ways this season.
No, yeah.
Ultimately.
I mean, both him and May.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, especially on the final episode. Holy shit. But no, yeah. I mean, that conversation, it was the exact opposite of that one conversation they had. What was it? I can't remember the episode.
The 5 or 6 where they were kind of like yelling at each other.
Yeah.
They were kind of pissed.
So yeah, so it was just like a nice little bow in the end of their arcs, like you just said. One thing I want to mention though, it's when you first see them in the lighthouse and like they realize that all of the shield bases are destroyed.
Yeah. Oh,
and then May, she gets like an Obi-Wan.
Literally.
I felt the disturbance in the Force.
Yeah. We couldn't end the show without one final Star Wars reference. That's one of
That's so true.
One of the low-key, underappreciated aspects of this TV show. There are always some of the best Star Wars references you'll ever see anywhere. But I mean, I know it's funny, but like that moment actually I feel landed. Like, even though it is funny, the Star Wars, it is basically Obi-Wan. Like I feel like 1,000, 100,000, whatever, voices were just, silenced. But it pretty much is what happened. And it also, just shows you the ability, the depth of the ability that May has as, what do we call her? An empath is...
I guess
that's the name that we call her and what she can do. I mean, just to touch on I just said how satisfying Coulson's arc was this season. So was May's. That was another one of those surprises that came out of left field that left you and I both wondering, what the fuck is this? But it served two purposes. Really, and we'll get to it, but it really was pivotal to putting the pieces together from a plot perspective of how they would win this final mission in the best way possible. But it also, more importantly, was the culmination of her character long arc for all of these seasons, and her putting her in a position where she's having to feel, having to show it and grow at it. She's a little bit uncomfortable in that exchange with Coulson where, like, do you like this me? Basically, she's asking in some way. And then, I like this you. If I'm being honest, I like this me too. They've done such amazing stuff with Coulson and with May over these last few years, in ways I wouldn't anticipate, and in ways they are the heart and soul of the show. I mean, so are the dynamic with Daisy and Coulson, which I think are the real heart and soul of the show. But so is May in there, and that family component that they kind of act as. But no, it was, I think, a beautiful way to really show that Melinda May has become really, oh my God, I'm trying to find the right words for it. One of the more empathetic characters. She was loving. And we see that through the powers that she now possesses, she's learning finally to accept her emotions and show them. And one of, the heartfelt moments of this episode where, the Zephyr team comes back to the speakeasy and, the first person that Daisy hugs is Coulson because they're so used to hugging at this point. They are father and daughter for the most part. But May is obviously a lot more tense. Not as a relationship, but she's just not approachable as Coulson is. But no, May's the one that just reaches for her and hugs her because that's what she wants to do. So in just those subtle moments, they're showing you really just great character stuff.
Oh yeah, no, I agree.
So we get to the speakeasy, and so I think it was pretty obvious, not that this is a critique, but I had figured that these collection of 084s was somehow going to lead us to Fitz. Only because like we're literally at the 11th hour. There's nowhere else. There's nothing. I mean, if you're saving for a grand entrance, this is literally the last hour. So there was nothing else I expected that it could be. But it was pretty ingenious how they laid it all out. And I think, as we wrap up this episode and then transition to the next, because this carries over as a theme, the strength of these writers to constantly make us feel stupid, because the revelations that come in terms of the answers of where Fitz was, what did all of this time travel stuff mean, it was staring us in the face the entire time. They literally blew, like, some of the most mind-blowing stuff they've ever been able to pull off as far as a time travel concept. They made me feel really stupid for like, oh, of course, that's what it was. And in this answer, we have, with Gemma, as I mentioned earlier, recognizing these pieces of 084s and out of nowhere just putting them together. And the looks on everybody's faces was like, what the fuck? Math is my faithful husband, and she does it all that. And then a last late minute entrance by an old friend of Enoch or the Koenigs, give or take, but delivering the final piece, or one of the final pieces, that would then reveal the secret door that opened up. And we see, and I have to admit, I didn't catch it until Fitz literally said the words quantum realm. I mean, I should have. I see it now. But what is revealed is a panel in the ceiling that would be revealed to be a portal to the quantum realm. And in terms of how it's shaped and how it opens up is exactly, well, maybe not exactly, but pretty similar in almost every way to the quantum portal the quantum gateway that Tony Stark created in Avengers Endgame, in terms of like how it looks like and how it opens. Yeah. I didn't catch that at first.
I noticed that as soon as the portal opened, my sister, she was watching the final episode with me. And like as soon as the portal opened, I went, it's the quantum realm.
It is.
Oh my God.
I didn't think they would do that.
I didn't think of it either. We just assumed that they were going to stick with the time stream, time traveling. Right. And then every episode we're like, oh my God, I'm gonna hate looking back at these episodes, and we're going like, I don't know how they're gonna fix this. And oh my God.
Oh my gosh.
And then he just goes through the portal, and I'm like, oh my God, they're just gonna go through it, and then everything's fixed now. It's perfect. And then you go to the next episode, and he literally explains it to them. It's like, this is what happened to you guys. You guys went back in time, cheated off, but now through the quantum realm, we get back to our normal time.
And it's so simple. And we should have seen that coming, because I think they really get us invested in the beginning episodes, where they throw out questions to us about whether or not the timeline even matters. Ripples, not waves. They kept reminding us. But then people began to die off, and the questions even grew there, because certain people died that would make some, the butterfly effect. So the butterfly effect, where some people would just blink out of existence. But the answer was simple there all along, and that is they did go back in time, but as soon as things begin to change, they branched off into a new timeline, which is exactly how Endgame works. When they go back in time, and they literally take Thanos out of it, they take an Infinity Stone, they create a new branch reality. And so when we wrap back around to last week's episode, Brand New Day, where Korra was, off the bat saying, haven't you guys figured it out by now? This is a brand new timeline. Now, she made it seem as if there's no way to get back to that old one. And there was a question about that anyway. But no, Fitz came directly from the old timeline. And more importantly, that you can basically go back and forth. I mean, granted that there's somebody on the other side, like, with the gateway and everything, but you can basically go back and forth through the quantum realm between these established timelines. And I was seeing this video. This is not S.H.I.E.L.D. related, but maybe more Endgame related. But someone put the pieces together and like, well, this kind of explains Captain America's situation at the end of Endgame. Where like, this people were really up in arms. I think you included about, well, this isn't a situation where Cap went back literally in the past and lived out all of the horrors of reality and he wouldn't do anything. For those who are adamant about Cap not standing still and letting those things happen, well, then that would basically prove you right, because he did go back and he created his own branch reality where he and Peggy lived out an entire life. And then he then returns through the gateway they had out the compound in that scene. He then returns to this reality, to this multi-dimensional, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So there's your answer. I mean, I accept it. That's pretty definitive, I feel.
That's actually really great. Oh, man. And then, I was going to say something. One thing, though. Would that be kind of confusing for people who didn't watch Endgame?
The quantum realm stuff?
Yeah. Not so much confusing, but kind of like... I mean, I guess it could disappoint some people. Because, because the whole time you and I were like, oh my gosh, how are they going to fix this? How are they going to fix this? And because we saw Endgame, we're kind of like, oh, obviously, And so I'm kind of curious, though, if some people who didn't watch the Marvel movies but watched the show, which, I mean, very doubtful, obviously, but who only watched the show and kind of like they get to the quantum realm part, are they going to think like, well, was it kind of pointless then? What happened? Or
well, that's a good question to ask. Well, as far as how Fitz explained it, it was a pretty great explanation for what happened. Yeah, I mean, pretty quick, to the point, obvious. Oh, the original timeline exists, and I just came from there, and we can all go back. Well, most of us can go back, and we can still win this fight and everything. There may be some lingering questions as to how exactly it works. Like maybe perhaps where they don't hold your hand. Well, even not necessarily so, because Fitz even says to Gemma before he gets into the containment module to shrink down into the quantum realm, and then basically the reveal is, because we see it in the next episode, Fitz, it was like an instant. He was in one timeline in 1 second, and then in this branched reality the next. It was that quick. And perhaps if you're not familiar with how quantum realm works from Endgame, that may leave you perhaps a bit confused. They do, I think, as much as they can. Fitz does say that for us it'll be an instant, so that's kind of all you get. I think obviously you're right, though. If you have seen Endgame, then you're very familiar with how the quantum realm works and how they used that in terms of the plot in that movie. So that's something I hadn't considered. It's interesting. That's very interesting. I mean, I can't answer it because I did see Endgame, before this, and I would imagine most S.H.I.E.L.D. fans in this era have seen Endgame before S.H.I.E.L.D. Now, future years down the line, I'm sure there'll be people who will watch this show first. Not even... Because everybody has their own entrance into their own franchise, right? Like, I can definitely see... There are, people who watch Clone Wars before they watch any of the Star Wars movies nowadays, or Rebels, or whatever have you. So... interesting questions as to how the show does explain it. I think I mean, I don't know. That's a very good question. I think that it was very well done, but I can't obviously give you the perspective of somebody who hasn't seen the movie. So that's interesting. But I mean, for those of you who've been wanting a connection to the MCU, this was a very overt connection to it. And yeah, it definitely makes sense. If Tony Stark can figure out the quantum realm, so can Fitz.
Of course.
And to be clear, the reveal, well, the reveal that Fitz and Simmons. Oh, I'll get to that in a bit. There was other stuff here. So to end off this episode, it basically is the triumphant, with the music swelling up and everyone's faces lighting up, the triumphant return of Fitz and his big smiling face and everything. It just felt so like, it's one of those things that makes you want to like, fist bump into the air. It was like, yes, here we are. Finally. And it feels so great finally too. Also great, another wonderful tie-in, that the helmet that he's wearing is Deke's helmet from the first time we see him in season 5. So as his, I mean, they don't have the Ant-Man suits obviously, so they need something else in this, whatever he came up with to build it. So, and that's the end of this episode. That's the end of the End at Hand. And it takes us directly off into the beginning of episode 13, what we're fighting for. And
I like the way it starts. You see the Marvel logo and you see the cast talking, which is, I'm guessing, an Infinity War reference, how they started off.
I'm not... What about it was a reference to Infinity War?
Well, the Infinity War started the same way. You see the Marvel logo and you hear a guy talking like, hey, we're on board. We're like, I can't remember what the guy said.
It could be. Yeah. I didn't catch that, but I didn't take it as a direct reference, but it could be that way. I did want to take the time to point that out because I just loved the logo. I love the fade in from black, and they had a lot of... S.H.I.E.L.D. has had a lot of wonderful opening sequences, especially this season. There's been so many of them to celebrate this final season and everything, but that one felt right. Kind of like one of those things that you do as you're about to bow out gracefully, as you're about to close the curtain. Basically, it's just a simple, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. logo with a black screen, and then we cut to the characters talking about what the fuck is going on. So just want to say that was perfect. A perfect last logo to open the last episode ever. Interesting, though. I hadn't considered that particular reference it could have been to. But perhaps it is. And we start off with everyone basically yelling at Fitz, where the fuck were you? Where the fuck were you?
Yeah.
And again, this is another example of the characters kind of acting like the audience, like, where were you? Which is what people were really yelling at, literally through their phones all season long. And to be clear, to answer those questions, Jed Whedon and Marissa Tancharoen, the executive producers, the showrunners for this show, did confirm that they filmed every scene that they could when they had Ian DeCasticker available. So, just in case people were wondering, I think that was the final confirmation that he definitely was busy and had a different project lined up when this was all going down. So, yeah, it's just to completely put that at ease. But no, we get straight into it, and we quickly start to realize what Fitz's plan is.
Yeah.
So I think before it is revealed to us, we get an assumption based on how he is talking that he has seen a copy of the time stream. Because, at this point, they've been hinting at that way because Enoch had seen the time stream, and he talked about how this will be your final mission together. So Enoch, Gemma, and Fitz had to have known this, obviously, before they take the final actions to come back to the past, save them from the temple, and then go on this time-traveling mission. So when he says that Korra is the key. And everyone was like, oh, shit. The looks up on everyone's faces was like, tell me you didn't just say that shit. She's with the enemy, as Daisy says. And at that, I mean, they were kind of angling that. I didn't really understand at that moment, obviously, what she would be the key to. Turns out she's very pivotal, as it ended up being. But yeah, Fitz didn't anticipate Korra being with the enemy, and he also didn't expect Jiaying to be dead. He did say that she also was very important, although I wish I would have seen what it was that he saw, that how she would have played into the events of all of this.
I mean, maybe it was just to convince her to come back.
Maybe.
And all that. I mean, who knows? I'm sure it was probably something like that. But what I liked, though, in the beginning, just all of that back and forth. Like, he's trying to, like, explain everything, but they're all kind of mad at him. And then I like that part, though, where he's just kind of like, I know you guys suffered and everything, but we got to get to work here quickly. And they're just like, you think we suffered? You don't know what we've been through and everything. Oh, man. Yeah, no, but it was kind of funny, but then at the same time, like, it felt really intense, that scene. It was great. It was really, really great.
I mean, look, it's understandable from both of their perspectives. Fitz has basically had no time between zapping from the quantum realm to now. While meanwhile the other team members have they've been through the ringer this year. You know, it's been a lot, and they're just, you know, it's a frustrating situation to be in. That whole thing. But you know, when Daisy says that, well, this is it, this is the last mission together, when they realize that, well, we know that we can get back through the quantum realm, we can go into our original timeline, and we can bring the enemy back with us and take care of them to save this timeline, basically. And Fitz is like, how did you know that? And Gemma was like, Enoch told us before he died. So, you know, something I feel like, I don't remember, I don't know if Enoch remembered this, or maybe Fitz, while he was reprogramming Enoch to not let anyone take Gemma's implant out of her, erased this part from his mind. But I feel like Fitz might have said his goodbyes to Enoch because they saw every outcome, every possibility for the time stream. It seemed as if, like, he's basically Doctor Strange. Like, there were so many ways that this could have played out, and he's seen the likeliest scenarios. So at least that's how I took that sequence. But very clearly and very quickly, we're at the moment where we're gonna have to lose someone. And I felt like who it was gonna be, I saw it coming because I think they had been teasing this in a way. I think that, so Deke was the one that ultimately was the one that you know, chose to stay behind. And from two aspects, it really is, again, the completion of his arc, again, being the one to make the ultimate sacrifice, the selfless one to do it. And also, it felt really appropriate for him because arguably he's never felt more at home than in this reality's 80s. And he kept saying that so many times. I think it was 3 weeks ago. He said something along the lines of, like, you know, I wouldn't mind spending, you know, staying in the 80s. I know you guys really want to go home and everything. So I felt like there was something that was going to lead up to it. So it starts off with Sousa obviously wanting to be that is very much in his character, the one to be the selfless one at all costs. And he starts saying goodbye to Daisy. Hilariously, Deke cuts it off with a very unflattering noise and then just says it, okay, I'm going to stay. Yeah. I'm going to stay. It's fine. Daisy, I want you to be happy. as long as Fitz and Simmons recreate, procreate, you're going to see me again. I'm kind of a rock god here anyway. And it's a perfect ending for him where it's like the man out of time finds the time that he's most happiest at. And it also, once and for all, shows just good of a person he is. That he, the unlikeliest of all characters, can be as selfless. In fact, even more so than Sousa, it seems like. And as a final thank you to the rest of these Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. for everything they've done for him, saving his life, and he's, giving it to them in return. And it was, sad, of course, to see him stay behind and him to, leave the finale a little earlier than expected, but it was, I think, the perfect resolution for him. And it just, it's a perfect exit for him as far as like when he makes up his mind and he starts like coaching the team. All right, let's go. Calling back to when he was the CEO of his company and how he treats his employees. It's go time, people. It's launch day, as he says. And then when they leave this timeline, it's even better because he's the new director of S.H.I.E.L.D. They literally like, I guess you're the guy in charge now, right? And it's like, yeah. And the music that's building up is the Deke theme that they used when in those episodes when he was basically commanding a company, and then it perfectly ends with Deke is like, yes.
No, it was actually really surprising for me because obviously Sousa was gonna be the one to like try to sacrifice himself and everything, but then Deke just goes. And like that's the part that caught me off guard. I'm like, oh shoot, okay, it's gonna be him. Awesome. And it was getting kind of sad because I like Deke and all that. But then as soon as people went up to him and went, so you the guy in charge? And he says yes. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's gonna live a perfect life here.
This is the perfect ending for him. This is the single perfect ending. Like, not only is he a rock god, like, I mean, that's a literal term. Like, he's a rock star and the director of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. No, that interview that they had with the whole cast, I wish they added that ending that the actor said where he's like, it's like it's going towards a chair. He turns around and he's wearing an eye patch. It's like he's trying to be Director Fury exactly like him. Oh my gosh, I wish we would have gotten that ending. But honestly, though, that's exactly what he would do.
That's exactly what he would do, and it makes so much sense. Just to be clear, if you want to see this interview, the cast did an exit interview with Entertainment Weekly, one of many that they did. And Jeff Ward had, the actor that plays Deke, had mentioned that he and one of the writers, DJ Doyle, had talked about doing a scene. I think it may have even been written somewhere. And keep in mind, of course, that there was... well, I need to learn how to stay on one thing before I go on to the next. But okay, so... Jeff Ward and DJ Doyle come up with this idea of doing a final post-credit scene for this show where it ends in Deke's reality, and he basically is donning the Nick Fury persona with an eye patch and trench coat and everything. And I see it in my head, and to completely agree with you, David, oh my God, I would have killed people to get that ending. Oh my God, that would have been perfect. I mean, just the way that it makes people laugh, it's like that just works so well.
Yeah. You know how exactly I know that's something he would do? It's because for the actual ending with Mac, the last shot we see of him, and he's dressed exactly like Fury. Like, yeah. He didn't need to do that. But he did it. Yeah. And he looked a badass, honestly. But, if he would do that, for sure Deke would try to, like, go all out. And I love the idea that they were like, he doesn't even need the eye patch. He just does it to look cool. Oh, my God.
It's hysterical. I actually kind of cry for not being able to see that. Like, that was so... Oh, my God. Oh, my fucking God. That would have been the perfect, like, tag at the end of this. It really would have. Damn. Maybe one day. What I wanted to mention, though, is with these episodes of television, there is stuff that usually, because the episodes when they're filmed and they have initial cuts do run long. From what I understand from this episode, because for time, there were some substantial scenes that were cut. One in particular was Deke saying goodbye to everyone individually. Fitz, Gemma, Daisy, Mac. Wow. I'm hoping we'll get to see those in a deleted scenes reel someday. And then other stuff that was cut for time was seemingly, I think Jed Wheaton had confirmed this, a mention of, what was it? A mention of the events of Infinity War, the snap, I think, was cut for time. I'm not sure if it was filmed or if it was supposed to be in the final version, but because there was a time crunch, there was supposed to be a mention of the snap in there somewhere. I don't have the exact details in front of me, but there are, in terms of like how the last minutes of the episode end and things that we see with S.H.I.E.L.D., certain scenes in space, I wonder, to me anyway, if they were planning on like officially confirming the snap, that then be the final answer of like, by the time that we wrap up and we get to the 1 year later in this show, both Infinity War and Endgame have happened and we're back in the MCU. If that's what they were intending. So there was some substantial stuff that was cut for time, unfortunately. Of course, it wasn't all the important beats were covered in the final version, but I'm not going to lie, I really would love to see some deleted scenes of these someday, hopefully on Disney Plus whenever it gets on there, because it has to go to Netflix first, and then that's not even to mention if they'll ever do like a box set, like a Blu-ray of all the 7 seasons, which I would buy in a heartbeat. In a heartbeat if I saw that go online. So here's hoping they do anything like that. But yeah, very interesting stuff. And again, this is the part where we also want to mention the visual effects, how wonderful they look.
Oh my god, the quantum realm, like, it honestly looked better than the movies. I'm not gonna lie, dude. Like, it looked pretty. Honestly, like that's the best thing I could say. Like, oh man!
Shout out to Mark Kolpak. He's really done amazing stuff. Again, this is a network television show, and as he says, and I agree, the best visual effects of any television show. Like, it is just so great considering how little money that he also talked about this week, how they had to basically in the episode where Yo-Yo gets her powers back and better than ever, they had like this big elaborate scene that they had planned out where she would like basically run as fast as she could in an extended sequence, like a burst of freedom kind of thing. But unfortunately, it was jettisoned because the money just wasn't there. So I know.
Yeah.
But the fact that they're able to deliver moments like that quantum realm sequence with what they have is so just, that's what I'm really appreciative of, is that they really do go above and beyond with limited resources. And that was, it may look better than the movies, like in terms of how the quantum realm was portrayed with the quanticom ships behind the Zephyr. It's beautiful, beautiful stuff. I do want to take this time to also say, like, before they left, a final nod between Mac and Deke, to kind of really acknowledge how much they've grown as friends, to watch out for little Alfie, his younger self in this reality, and everybody else. And one last time, thank you, Agent Shaw. I really love Deke. I really love Jeff Ward. He brought so much to this performance. He brought so much to this character. The renewals for season 6 and 7, I feel like were justified just by having more Deke. I'm just really glad that we ended the show where we got to have a lot of him and have a fully fledged arc as well. Again, not just with this season, but also think back to like when we first met him in season 5, how selfish he was and how like completely, ready he was to sell people out just for his own skin. And of course we come here to the finale and we have the complete opposite of that. So they do really great character stuff on this show that most network shows don't bother to do. And one of the reasons why I love it so much. So thank you, Agent Shaw. Thank you so much. And so now we get Fitz, and we finally get to see what is happening or what has happened. And it may have been alluded. I mean, we were under somewhat of an impression that, with blood work being mentioned, perhaps Fitz died. They were saying a lot before this reveal happened that Fitz died. So that wasn't the case. And as was mentioned in a previous scene from a previous episode, it does not matter when we build the time machine. You can go back when, you can take as long as you want, as long as you go back in that particular point. And the ultimate reveal was that Fitzsimmons already got their happy ending. They had the opportunity finally to live. And yeah, it was, I'm looking at my notes here, and I wanted to like be clear about how long they were actually gone. And that's one of the questions we had all season long, is, Gemma and Enoch kept saying time, we've had time to do this and everything, but nobody really got a straight answer out of them. And I think it was Ian DeCastricker who confirmed this on one of the interviews, that it was 4 years. It took him 4 years to come up with time travel. Also, they were kind of putting it off because they had a baby and they had, that was the thing that Gemma the entire time was trying to remember, but couldn't up until we reached like the climax of the episode, basically, with all of the pieces finally coming together. But so we see the explanation for how things went, and it honestly blew my mind. I was just laughing at how stupid I was feeling in terms of like, the ultimate reveal. They did invent time travel, and they utilized Flint and Piper, bringing them back into the fold one last time, because we hadn't seen them like since the season 6 finale, and them being used to come up to build a fragment of the time monolith to guard the containment module, which would, with Fitz would be on one side, and then Alia, their daughter, would be on the other. And the answers were so beyond obvious as they were revealed. It made me feel so dumb because of how well they were hidden. Like, okay, well, yeah, why didn't I? But then the moment where it really just like threw me was when they were revealed to be those fucking people in the hazmat suits at the end of the season 6 finale, with Simmons.
That part, it's like, that's time travel confusing right there. Because, like, the thing that throws me off the most, though, is when they say, Enoch says, like, oh, good, they brought backup.
Right.
And I was like, who were you waiting for to get backup? Like, Fitz getting backup? Or, it's just that piece of dialogue that kind of confuses me. But it is like a mind trip of, like, what was happening.
Yeah. So, like, I mean, if you go back to the season 6 finale, there were people in hazmat suits that, entered the temple with Simmons, with the body thing, the body bag, the whatever, the pod that they put May in, as well as people, some of the hazmat suits, people were taking pieces out of the time monolith. We didn't really, and then they just kind of disappeared, and no one really questioned, like, where the fuck did those people go? Like, they were not obviously they weren't on the Zephyr because we never saw them, nor were they ever mentioned. So they just kind of like disappeared off screen. And, you know, people would probably assume, oh, well, you know, they didn't really know what they were going to do this season, so they kind of like just forget about them. But no, we tie directly back into the events of last season's finale. And wow, it just like, it was staring me in the face the entire fucking time. Fitz was there, literally there all the time. He was one of the people in those hazmat suits. And so was Sousa and Yo-Yo and Simmons. And then they all go back to the lighthouse. And the lasers themselves that were firing at the Zephyr at the end of last season were not from the ship we had thought. They were actually from Sybil's forces that literally just, you know, in the outer atmosphere were just taken out of their own reality from the quantum realm. Meanwhile, this Zephyr is basically about to start season 7. It's oh my god. It's one of those things like, I'm sure writing this can make your head explode.
Oh yeah.
And by the way, like, if this sounds convoluted, it really is, but like, immense praise to it being executed in the direction in a way that didn't make you feel like lost or confused. At least I didn't feel that way. I just felt excited for how well they were able to pull this off.
Yeah, like I honestly didn't expect. I didn't expect that at all, really, from that scene. And I mean, like you said, like they pulled it off super well, and I wasn't confused. I mean, I know I said that, like who brought the backup and all that, but like the sequence of events, like I wasn't confused at all. It's so it was an incredible scene, honestly.
Yeah, it's great. Of course, that coincides with Team Zephyr masking their presence, getting onto the Chronicom mothership, as we call it. Meanwhile, Fitz, Simmons, Yo-Yo, and Sousa, after having done their part at the temple, go back and take the lighthouse. We see a great quick scene where Yo-Yo, you know, dispatches the first forces of the Chronicoms. They get to the main control room. They lock themselves in. Wonderful moment where Sousa and Yo-Yo. First of all, that's the first time Sousa even saw Yo-Yo's powers, which was like, oh, okay, that's what she can do. And then they have a wonderful exchange later on where, don't worry too much about Mac, and then she's like, don't worry too much about Daisy. And at that moment, it all goes back, like, they're your everything for you. And I, Gemma Simmons, am now beginning to remember. She looks at Fitz. Fitz realizes that she's remembering, I remember what we're fighting for. Which, you know, I think it's interesting. Like, I'm sure a lot of people may feel this way anyway, no matter how well it's done. That, oh, family, that's what we're fighting for. I'm sure people can look at that as like hokey or overly sentimental, but no, it felt really appropriate. It felt especially appropriate because these characters are a family. These actors, this cast and crew are a family. This community of fans are a family. And that's how it feels like. And so I think the writers did an amazing job of being able to weave together how everyone was feeling about the ending of this. You know? So then I'll get more into that later on. So this is happening, and then of course back at the mothership for the Chronicoms, Coulson, Mac, May, and Daisy split up, and we get to see them kick ass. Almost immediately. What were some of your favorite stuff that happened there?
Oh man, well,
where do we start?
No, I mean, well, you get Mac. His very little. He got a very short scene. Basically, just you see the axe shotgun thing again. He shoots him up a bit and just saves Cora. And then you get Daisy and Malik going one-on-one now, and then you find out that he took Cora's powers and everything. And you know, it was a pretty cool fight. Like I really liked how she would use it to kind of throw him off, but then go back to like martial arts, basically what May taught her.
I don't know if it was. Let's stay on that real quick. I don't know if it was one of the. I think it may have been Marissa Chantroan who may have mentioned this in the interview, one of her interviews, where she said that was, again, like, in terms of how she's fighting, she's using all of the abilities that she's learned throughout this show, not just like solely relying on her powers, but then also using them to distract Malik and then revert back to her combat, her, hand-to-hand combat that May showed her herself. Like, we even start off that way. I think I was really like, it kind of almost felt a little like Black Widow-ish when she would hang on one guy with her legs while also holding another guy in her arms and like spinning around and knocking them out simultaneously. So a lot of great combat stuff in there as well. And of course with, the Quake powers. It also, I mean, I don't know if this would be a criticism about this show as to maybe more of a critique about how overly used this is in superhero anythings, where, and to be fair, I don't know how, this may be the first time they do it, I think, in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., but where the villain or the bad guy is basically like having the exact same powers as the hero. Like, that happens like way too much for my taste in any kind of superhero movie. And, but I mean, I think it was appropriate for this being the finale. So it's like, oh, okay, like Daisy has to overcome Malik, who is the manifestation of all of the evil that has, hurt her repeatedly in her entire life. But then also he has her powers and she has to overcome that as well. And some people, and one of the things, just to stick on with that, I think it was really well directed. Again, to pull that off and how they did it, they really must have saved their pennies, didn't they? For this sequence, a lot of that going around. And I think what made it really work though is especially how when Mac and Coulson just left her like that, she was toying with him. Really? Because as soon as she sees them leave on the Zephyr, she unloads. And I mean, obviously the plan was before they went in that it would come as a risk, because you don't really know if all the pieces are going to like resolve, but she essentially did do a sacrifice play, but she was holding back clearly, because then she fucking like in the final like burst and it culminated with obviously Daisy's theme in there, pushing back Malik and destroying the Chronicom ship. Yeah, I feel that was the effect, is that Daisy was, I mean, I'm sure like he gave her a run for her money, but clearly she was dragging it out longer, I feel, considering how quickly she could have dispatched him.
Well, I mean, like I said, Malik, he kind of gets more creative with how he uses his powers. Yeah. I think for Daisy, it was just kind of like to throw him off. It's just like shoot. But with him though, like he was kind of like, almost kind of like whipping it up, using it. Right. Like you see at one point, like he pulls his arm back and everything, punches her, and she kind of goes in the air a bit and everything. So he gets creative with how he uses his powers. But yeah, like we said last episode too, she has like incredible strength with her powers though compared to his. And I liked, so she destroys all the ships, and I liked she survived space because of the fucking centipede thing that she had, right? You remember she used it against Graviton?
Yeah, so I think what happens is a combination of a couple of things. I feel like, so her being able to do that and basically just blow up the ships, it was a massive quake. Yeah, I mean, all like the abilities, I mean, maybe you haven't seen it as much, but like, yeah, the centipede stuff really enhanced her powers. We saw that how she destroyed a whole bunch of Shrek instantaneously in season 6, and then we show it, in full of force here when she basically just unleashes the full strength. She doesn't destroy one ship. She destroyed the whole fleet because of that. I think there was a combination of factors there. She might have prepared herself for that, but she definitely was exposed. I feel like she couldn't have been out all that long because the team would immediately, as soon as the explosion happened, go look for her. And then what they were banking on was for Korra to revive her, not like bring her back from the dead, because you don't die in space that quickly. I think you can survive in space, I think a few minutes or so, but barely. And even if like you come back into a place where there's oxygen, there's no like there's no guarantee that you'll recover in any sense at all. But I feel like, again, not knowing entirely like what Korra's powers are, because they're simultaneously, they can be used to destroy and they can be used to revive. And she tried to revive her mom, Jiaying, back in the old timeline, but it didn't work. She'd already been dead. She'd been long dead, pretty much. But yeah, they were banking on Korra being able to save Daisy there at the end, because she can revive her or give her enough strength anyway to come back from the damage that does, because it does do a lot of damage to you. Obviously, being in space, people don't survive that. There's no oxygen, and then you start to do all these things in that. But yeah, I didn't take it like she was out there for like a long time, because that would have been like, you're dead, you know?
No, I just thought, like I said, like the show does a great job of paying off stuff. And so I kind of thought, like, oh, okay, of course she could survive space because she has the centipede serum thing inside of her and all that. But also just the combination of Korra, like, we thought Korra was going to do the sacrifice play, but it was Daisy that did it. Yeah. And it was a cool thing that Korra was the one that saved her life.
Yeah, and Korra did a lot, actually, in that third, when all this action was going down. So when Coulson gets, quote-unquote, captured by Sybil, and he tricks her into revealing how she gives Draconicom's orders. Again, we talked about how May, literally, that was an amazing sequence. May, like, literally just, like, breaks through glass, knocks out Sybil in one, like, kick, and, like, announces herself as the cavalry. God, again, one of the most exciting, exhilarating moments that you just want to see in a show like this, and they just kick ass. With they wipe the floor with those Chronicoms. And as Mac brings in Korra and everyone goes to their places, then you begin to understand, oh, this is how you win. And that is, we're going to use Korra's powers to directly send the message from the mothership to the lighthouse. And they're going to use May and her empath abilities to give the enemy empathy. And there was so much about that decision that I think just is so significant. For one, it kind of bucks that tired trope where we have like an army of robots or aliens, and once the thing in the sky gets like resolved, then they all shut down and they're all dead and blah 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 blah, which we've seen that done so many times and could have very well easily been done here. But they really get creative with this, and they give the enemy empathy. And I didn't see that coming at all. At all. And it was so momentous, it coming from May. That was her ability. And then when when Yo-Yo asks, are you friend or enemy? And the Chronicom says, friend, as we have always been. And it was wonderful, nod to Enoch there. But you also then, you start to picture in your mind that Enoch and Fitz may have discussed this as being one of the ways that we could not defeat the Chronicoms, but save the Chronicoms and give them what Fitz and Simmons were able to give Enoch, and that is empathy and love. And again, it's one of those things that to some people may seem hokey or overly sentimental, but there's something I think truly special and powerful in defeating your enemy by showing them who you are and giving them the ability to feel and love. Like, if that isn't like a perfect metaphor for this series, I don't know what is. Like, this is... I mean, I'm out of words. David, you say something.
I mean, honestly, I didn't even see it that way. I just found it like incredibly creative that they set up this thing with May that she was the one to ultimately save the day. And I think it's cool that she saved the day. I mean, she fought, obviously, but it wasn't by fighting, but to do the Coulson thing.
Yes.
You know? So, oh man, that's insane. And what you said though, like, what's his name? Fitz and Enoch having a conversation of how to save the Chronicoms, because obviously Enoch doesn't want to destroy his people.
Of course not.
They didn't even think of that. Oh my god.
It all makes sense, right? When you think about them. Okay,
it all makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know, that's kind of like what it left me. It's like, of course, again, like all of this is directed beautifully, and it ramps up to a beautiful climax, but just like the full effect of it, I don't think you can feel until after you just like sit down and think about all of the different things that were going on that made that moment work so well, for everybody involved. And again, Korra herself being the one to amplify that, her being a redeemed villain and her finally finding love through family. And then, she saves Daisy. This is what we're fighting for. Family, love, empathy, all those things. And then, of course, it crescendos beautifully well to the reveal at that point in the episode of Alia, the daughter of Fitz and Simmons. And oh my goodness, and all of the various reactions that I've seen. Oh my God, I just get so emotionally happy just seeing Gemma and Fitz just those shots of them just being so emotionally overwhelmed with joy and the pride that's in their faces for their daughter. It's so, I don't know what the word for it is. It's so full of heart, obviously. And one of the things that I feel that it reminds you, I think, that this show does what the best of superhero genre anything does. And that is you give it a lot of heart. Like that's what I think all of us, if we're ready to like choose our favorites about what the best of this genre of storytelling has to offer, the stuff that makes it the most relatable and that we can connect with the most is the heart. Think of the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, for instance, and its focus on that, on the deepest bare bone emotional level. And this is what I think the show does well above other entries in this, not only this particular franchise, the Marvel Cinematic Universe, but the genre as a whole. And it all feels so wonderfully earned. It all just lands so well. God. And yeah, that whole sequence that we just like spent half an hour talking about, like the pieces just came together in the best possible way. To the point where like you're wondering, like, man, they pulled it off. And they were able, one last time, they were able to completely blow me away with the machinations of the writing, the plot being revealed, the character moments, the emotion, the execution of the direction, and all the music. Oh my God, fantastic, fantastic.
to go back with Fitz and Simmon's kid, you mentioned earlier that you didn't really see it coming. I actually theorized it a few episodes ago, but it felt like such like an outlandish theory that I didn't mention it.
Did it feel outlandish?
Kind
because
of.
now looking at it doesn't.
yeah, it doesn't. But like I don't know, I just felt like but because what confused me is like, okay, why would she forget her kid?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so that was like the crazy part for me. But then also, it's just kind of like, where would they put the kid? Was he with Fitz, or you know? But then, well, with that theory came up a bunch of other theories, so I just kind of left it behind. And so when you see the reveal of the kid, I was like, yes, because like you know, Fitz and Simmons are a family now.
Mm-hmm.
But also just love the exchange. I love the kid really because she was
so cute.
Yeah, she was adorable. She was very excited to see Simmons, and like she says like, oh, you say you're gonna be gone for a long time.
That wasn't long.
I didn't feel. Yeah, she's crying like, I haven't seen you in months or like weeks, whatever. I don't know. And but then I also love like where she goes. I was like, oh, I heard some like noises outside. I was like a little bit scared.
Yeah.
And I just kind of like laughed it off. They seem like very proud parents and all that.
Yeah, and then of course that's accompanied with a sequence of their life, because it was teased at before, but then the full reveal of it is that Alia was there, you know, in the pregnancy period, as a baby, as a toddler, and it's just beautiful moments where they're flying the stars in the Zephyr. It was one of the things that back in episode 12, when Deke and Gemma get back onto the Zephyr, the first thing she calls the Zephyr, she recognizes as home. And it was their home for all those years in that star system. Yeah, that was so rewarding, so satisfying, so just everything. So this brings us to 1 year later. We're here, and this will be some of the final moments. And they these, even at the end, they're still getting me. Like I literally thought that they were meeting in the actual bar, but it ended up being like everyone's separated. And they're meeting in the framework, basically. And it's the same kind of technology that Deke himself had developed back in early season 6. They used that technology when I think Deke was about to package it as some kind of a video game or something, but that you can meet virtually, through the framework. And it was a nice console or desktop or whatever you want to call it for their meeting. It also just felt like the perfect place for everyone to like round up. It had been basically one of the main sets for the season. It just felt so right. And we're 1 year later and we're seeing the gang, and they obviously look moved on. Some time has passed in terms of like how they look, and then also what they're wearing. You mentioned Mac walking in all Nick Fury like with this big trench coat. May also looks professionally dressed. Fitz and Simmons are literally dressed like parents. Daisy again has a new hairstyle. She always likes to do stuff with her hair and stuff like that. And it we'll get into the individual stuff that they talk about, but on the whole, it just felt so appropriate. It in and of itself, it is a commentary of just life. And one of the unfortunate aspects is that no matter how much amount of time you spent with a group of people, there will come a point where you will grow apart and you will move beyond what that was. And on some level, that is sad. But the beauty of it is you will never lose that connection. And you saw that so beautifully portrayed there. And it's just so like, I think it was so brilliant to incorporate that feeling. That was the feeling that they wanted to leave you with, because that's what all of us, the audience, and also even the cast and crew were feeling. It's like, we've gone on this incredible journey. And goodbyes are always so hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
But they really captured it, the actors and the writing, so wonderfully, of a group of people that are noticeably more distant than they ever were before, but at the same time, the connection and that sense of family remains. And you can tell how deeply they care for one another. And it gave the audience a final opportunity to see these guys talk with each other one more time. And it sets up a series of endings that to me are, as I mentioned, pitch perfect. And they leave you so satisfied in terms of how they're left with and what they leave you with, to where it's like, it was such I remember being so nervous for this, because you know how finales are. Like, no matter how good things are going, you don't know if it's gonna, like, you hope for the best, but you never know for sure until it actually plays out. And for me, it was such like a sigh of relief when, as the scenes of endings kept happening, and I was like, oh, that's good. Like, yes, you're hitting all the right notes that I wanted out of you. So yeah. How did it come across for you?
So I agree with everything you said. It was great endings for each character, and I loved when they're in the bar. I love the back and forth that they have, like what they're doing right now, and like what they've been doing, and how they've been trying to connect throughout that year. The thing though is that I hate time skips.
Oh. The 1 year the 1 year later thing?
Yeah, I hate time skips. Oh my god. It cuts the tension from what they were doing before. And I get, like I said, like, I liked the back and forth. It was great. It was funny. Even my sister was laughing at it when she saw it. And like she's only seen like a few episodes of the show. But it's just kind of like, I just don't like it.
So it was like more of an annoying aspect to you.
Yeah, I saw that in, what was it, iZombie? It's a CW show. And, it was building up intensely. There was a bomb going off. People were going to die left and right and everything. And then it just skips to 3 months later. And it's just kind of like, wait, hold on. Like, no, we were just there. What the heck?
Why? Why do you have to do this? We're already at an emotional place.
And so, just the time skips, they throw me off. And so, yeah. But again, I like where they're at. I love the endings. I think they're exactly where they need to be. Max, the director, Yo-Yo's
team,
still an agent, but like
some of them are still agents.
Team now,
I think.
And I like how she's teamed up with
Piper, and the reveal of an LMD Davis, which is like the one thing I know. It's the one. So Simmons had promised Piper, if you protect this is my everything. I will give you literally whatever you want. And it's a little bit of a sweet, testament how much like Piper missed Davis. And I'm sure like this Davis is also like, because Davis also had a family. So I'm sure that this is, we'll just, we'll pave it over. It kind of, it ultimately it is sweet. Although it brings up questions, about like, are we just going to replace everyone with LMD versions of themselves once they die, and this team's never going to die? which is also kind of a joke because there was this moment where they acknowledge that they, at one point or another, they've all died at least once.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah. And then, Fitz and Simmons.
Oh my God.
I've loved their relationship right from the beginning. But I've hated that, like, will they, won't they? Are they ever going to be together?
The whole fucking show.
Yeah. And so just to finally see them, like, okay, they're a family and they're retired, basically. And then, Daisy's ending, it was really beautiful because, like, she has someone who cares about her, who she cares about, and she literally has a family member, like a blood relative.
Yeah, she got a new family.
Yeah. And so, again, beautiful endings with all of them. I just hate time skips.
All right. So, about the time skip, did you hate it in Endgame?
Like 5 years later? That one? Well, no, because it wasn't...
It was at the beginning of a story, not the end of a story?
It was at the beginning of the story. And again, whenever they do that in an ending, it completely cuts off attention. Whereas this one, though, they faded out of it, you know?
Okay.
And it's just kind of like, oh, dang, what's going to happen next? And so you kind of... And so the time skip makes sense because they have no idea what the heck to do. And...
Okay, so, I understand that. We all have our, like, oh, they're doing this shit again. All right. I get it. But at least the endings landed with you, so that obviously was the most important part of it. So good on that. Yeah, it was... Oh my goodness. It just felt like a natural conversation between all of them. I love this little exchange. So after they've recognized that they've all died and Yo-Yo was like, I was a zombie once. Fitz goes like, so was Mac actually. And then she's like, was I there for that? No, you weren't there for that. This was, remember the whole Kree situation that happened at the temple?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
No, then they're mentioning Sousa and who was it? Simmons. She was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe he writes a letter. She's just... And Daisy's just like, I know, he's such a little dork.
I love the shout out to E.T., which is like one of my favorite moments, movies, sorry, from one of my favorite TV shows, and always one that makes me cry. And so I love that little shout out. Mac and Coulson say two things simultaneously. Mac says classic, and Coulson says great movie. So yeah. So we see, as they're all leaving off, May is now teaching, and you see her, with Flint in her class, and there was something so, of course I should have seen it coming, because that was something that they were teasing all the way back in season 6, in some of the flashback scenes with OG Coulson in May and Tahiti, where Coulson says to May, you should teach. You'd be great at it. That's what I would like for you to do. And then they start to set up an academy early on in that season with another character about, basically the beginning phases of rebuilding S.H.I.E.L.D. for reals this time. And it just felt so right for her character. Like, this is, of course, where she would move on next. This is her role. She would be an amazing teacher, and she now has kind of the emotional capacity of a parent to give this her all. And it's one of those things that nearly broke me, where she and Flint walk off into the building and then it said Coulson Academy. That was so sweet. I loved it so much. Then we say goodbye to Fitz and Simmons. Oh my God. Just seeing them basically in a happy garden with their daughter was the best possible ending for Fitzsimmons. Like, that's literally what everybody wanted out of this finale. And that was great. We see Mac leave with him being on a fucking S.H.I.E.L.D. helicarrier. being fucking Nick Fury, basically. And you begin to like ask questions as like these characters are getting these perfect like endings and everything. You ask yourself like, obviously Shield is back in full force in this timeline anyway. And you ask yourself like, well, I feel like the message is being, obviously getting across is we're post Endgame and we're rebuilding, and Sword is a thing, not them personally, but Nick Fury is out in space with the Skrulls. We see Daisy is out in space. They don't say Sword, and even Jeff Bell, the executive producer, says, well, we didn't necessarily had that in mind, but it very much could very well be taken as something of an extension of S.H.I.E.L.D. in space, or the beginnings of a Sword-like program, with them being out in space on Zephyr 3, as they mention here. The helicarriers are back. We have academies are back. And then if you notice, because Max says, are you at HQ? And in the final shot where Coulson is driving away on Lola, in the background, we see a rebuilt Triskelion.
Mm-hmm.
So, whether Kevin Feige's cinematic universe acknowledges that any of these things are back at all, that S.H.I.E.L.D. or the Triskelion are back, I don't know. I can't expect that they will, but this show ended with S.H.I.E.L.D. back in full force and the best possible version that it could be. And that's just... I'm at the point where I can't even say any more words. I really can't with that. But that I like that touch ultimately. We end off with Daisy and Coulson being the last to go of that exchange. And, this is the perfect way to end the series. They are the heart and soul of it. Their relationship and their dynamic has been what has been the thing on this show from the beginning. And it's just a wonderful exchange where Daisy, acknowledges to Coulson, like, look at what you did here. This is what you did. It wouldn't have happened because of you. And then people who are lost, and now. And it was that perfect just culmination of their relationship. Coulson mentions Cora, your new recruit. How is she doing? And Daisy acknowledges, like, it's funny what can happen when someone believes in you. Looking at Coulson and him being... I've caught that scene a couple of times, and you see Clark Gregg, or as Coulson, I think it was played off as him being a little bit caught emotionally in that moment. And in the script itself, as we saw on the table reading, like, Coulson looks proudly at her. It's just those final exchanges were, I know we keep saying perfect, we keep seeing great, like the best way, but that was just the best way to wrap up the series, with those two, and with the recognition of the journey that has been this show. And then we end off with Coulson driving off in Lola, off into the sunset, and there we are. And, there was some controversy online, I noticed, by Felinda fans about the relationship and how that was left with. And I think the writers ultimately had the best answer to that, and that is their ultimate relationship is far more profound than just a simple romantic entanglement. And just because they're this way now doesn't mean that down the line they can't have some kind of ultimate relationship. There were, if you notice in that sequence, there were these longing looks at each other from Coulson and May did say, you should come around, you should come swing by, not for just for the kids, but I'm sure she'd like to see you as well. And yeah, like, Coulson and May are growing, and there will always be in each other's lives. But it's the end of the show, it's the end of the story, but it's not the end of their lives. So the writers ultimately say, like, it doesn't mean that at some point down the line they can't come back together. It's just that right now Coulson is still trying to figure out what he wants, you know? And
not yet.
And it's the perfect place because Coulson has always had to do this, had to do that, and now for once he gets to do what he wants freely. What do you think?
No, I mean, I really like Coulson's ending too. He has his own choice to basically die now on his terms, basically. But he's gonna go the long way around.
A Doctor Who reference there.
Yeah, right there. But yeah, and then I can understand the frustration between Phil and the fans, because I mean, I would hate it too if like two people that I thought were perfect together just don't end up together. But like you said, it can happen down the line. It's just Coulson needs to figure out stuff. And at the same time, though, the writers gave them their ending, you know, on season 5, was it? In Tahiti. Like, that was their moment together.
Yeah.
You know? And it's always, and then in season 7, it was just the big question of, am I the real Coulson here? You know? And so, and I never really saw it as them not being together anymore at the end.
Yeah, I didn't see it that way either. Like, the way that the feeling was, is like what I just said, basically. I didn't take it as, oh, they're never going to be together. I took it as, this is a year later.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's just kind of like, with Coulson at least, I think he'll always be there for her. Because he's literally going to be there for her forever. He's going to live on forever. Or at least until he thinks it's time for him to go. So yeah, I never really saw it as them. They're not going to be together. I think they'll be together till the end.
Yeah. To me, it's interesting when you compare, like, there are certain TV shows out there that for circumstances that are, you know, by nature of this business, they end up doing not one but 2 series finales because they never know if they're going to come back. And so in this case, it happens to be one of those shows where we have 2 episodes that were intended as series finales. We have the one from season 5 and then this one, which ended up being the real series finale. And what was so, I think, both great episodes, both great endings, but very different. One was decidedly sad. In the fact that you had Fitz die and the confirmation that Coulson would die. And then here was, for the most part, pretty happy. Because this is the happy ending. And if I'm being honest, like, if you're going to compare the finales, like, I think if season 5 ended where it was, they did the best they could. But I just think season 7 just felt more, I don't know, I guess, right, poetic in how it finished things off, you know? And it helps that it's a happy ending, too. I think everybody loves a happy ending and a good ending. I'm so happy it's not one of these situations where the ending ruins the whole show. Oh, Game of Thrones. Unfortunately. Because that has happened. But now, thankfully, that weight has been lifted off our shoulders and we have a complete story that, beginning, middle, and end, is fantastic. So, as we close off, David, any lingering thoughts or questions or something we want to address as we leave Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. behind?
I definitely recommend rewatching it for anyone who hasn't seen it since it first aired, because it hits different the first season. Oh my god. Because I remember we talked about it and I said that, the beginning of the first season, it's kind of rough. But that was only because we had no idea where this thing was going to go, or what the heck they're really doing with this show. You know, you're just following. Yeah, you're there for Coulson, but the rest of the team, you just kind of like, okay, they seem cool. I mean, whatever. And then it kind of turns because you get that Hydra reveal, and that's the reason why that was cool, is because it's a direct reference to the movies and all that, but also just it's a really big twist. And so rewatching it after the finale, it's just kind of, again, it hits differently because you see Fitz, Simmons, and Daisy, and they're literally children in that first season.
Yeah.
And and then like if you missed it, the direct references to the movies. I mean, for one thing, I didn't watch Winter Soldier when it came out in theaters, so it was the Hydra thing. It was a big reveal for me. But then we were watching it, and you see that one guy with the glasses, the one that goes into the boat,
Jasper Sitwell,
yeah. And so you see an episode, he's in it, and he goes, "Well, I gotta head to a boat."
Yeah, the Lumerian Star. Yeah.
That's the Lumerian Star. Okay, that's cool.
You didn't watch Winter Soldier in theaters?
Yeah.
What?
I know.
Dude, that was, I think, one of my most memorable experiences. It was unique in that I was watching this show week to week, and that episode happened. Jasper Sitwell's going to the Lumerian Star. I don't know, whatever that meant. And then you see the movie that weekend, and then you come back pumped for the Hydra reveal is coming when it's going to come. It was just a unique experience being able to see a continued story like that begin with SHIELD, Cap, and then to me that's why I've always really, Cap's movies and SHIELD have been so close together for me in my heart, basically, and Winter Soldier saved the show. We can't say it enough times, Alex, but man, you didn't see that movie in theaters at all?
No, man.
What? Oh my god.
Yeah. Nah, but again, definitely rewatch at least the first season. I mean, I will see how I'm going to react the next ones after. But you really see a ginormous change within these characters from the first to the last. It's insane.
I'm sure you're also feeling this as well, as that, the original consensus stands with the flaws of the seasons, but it's, regardless of any flaws, you're reminded of why you love this show. And that why any episode of this show is just good, because it's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And ultimately, yeah, I love that too when they hit different when you're rewatching certain shows, especially if you hadn't seen it for a long time. It's kind of like me. I hadn't seen Airbender until this year, since, oh my god, whenever it aired, which was over 10 years. So, and it does hit different. It does. I mean, it's still as great as you remember it, but maybe even better in some ways, and maybe you're more loving of it in certain aspects that you wouldn't have before when it was, when you first saw it. Yeah. Yeah, it hits different, I'm sure. Well, if we're going to close off this episode, I do want to thank, everyone involved. From the writers, DJ Doyle, Drew Greenberg, directors, Gary Brown, Kevin Tancherowan, producers, Jeff Bell, Jeff Loeb, the showrunners, Marissa Tancherowan, Jed Whedon, composer, Bear McCreary, VFX director, Mark Kolpak, the stunts people. You did an amazing job all 7 seasons. Oh my god, all of these directors, all of these writers whose names I can't remember, and of course the cast and the crew. Chloe Bennett, Clark Gregg, Ming-Na Wen, Natalia Cordova Buckley, Henry Simmons, Jeff Ward, Ian DeCastiger, Elizabeth Henstridge, so on and so forth. And also someone who doesn't get, as much love, Channing Dungey, the former head of the ABC television network, who left a few years ago after the Fox merger, who I think was really a pity that she left the company and she was forced out, because she was a talent and she did such good things for ABC. But, she was always a supporter of our little show, a little engine that could, and she ultimately was the reason for all of the seasons that happened with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Even before she left the company, one of the last things she did was renew S.H.I.E.L.D. for season 7. After having done so with 6 and 5 and 4 and 3. And all of these seasons that we got with this show were never guaranteed. In fact, the odds were always stacked against us. They really were. And I want to thank her for all of those times that she resisted, I'm sure, her own board of executives, even when Disney was no longer forcing the show to stay on air. She was there for us, and so we want to thank her as well for keeping the show alive. And to all of the fans, of course, who have made this such a wonderful experience, such a joyous fandom experience overall, you know, compared to other fandoms that have become so toxic and hate-filled and just intolerable, basically. With how ugly things have gotten. But this has always just been a source of joy, a beaming light, and a show that proved itself against all odds. And I am so enormously proud of what it has accomplished. And I myself am just filled with such immense satisfaction at this story and the memories that I have of watching this show and talking about it with my friends, I'll always cherish. And thank you, just thank you so much for this wonderful, wonderful show. And the good thing is that it's now on us as the fans to do our part and to spread the love as much as we can, because unfortunately one of the aspects of the show is many people tuned out. While they stayed watching the movies, a lot of people just didn't watch this show. And it is such a tight-knit little community that has stayed with this show and that has appreciated it and loved it for all these years. And I have no doubt that the years will be very kind to our little show. And I'm also thankful for the lessons and the wonderful identity that this show has been able to bring out in the world. The promotion of empathy and love and all things good, and everything from its political shades it's thrown at some people over the years, you know, fascism, Trump, whatever have you. A cornerstone of television in the 2010s. And the end of an era with this age of Marvel television, which is now officially behind us. The first and last show of Marvel Entertainment. 7 seasons, 136 episodes. So, I'll get back to you guys if and when I ever accept that this is actually over. But, you know, until then, thank you, David, so much for being here these last 12 or so weeks, recapping these episodes with this show. You've been a key part of this season and me being able to fully enjoy this season and being able to speak it with you and, you know, to discuss these things. And thank you all for listening. This has been our Beyond the Shield series here on Red Spotlight. We have many, many more stuff coming at you under our big red spotlight. Until next time, thank you all very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.